Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important updates that took place during the previous night of the local time. First we're going to start from Avdiivka direction because the most important updates are coming from this territory. Today the Ukrainian sources, to be more precise the forces of 53rd Mechanized Brigade, published the video how they were attacking the Russians in this area, which confirms that the Russians during the previous clashes in this area managed to establish control over this sector. The 53rd Mechanized Brigade located right exactly in this on the top of the Russian progress, and this brigade is responsible for the defense of this line. So if we take a look at the map, we're gonna see that during the previous days the Russians launched an offensive operation along the city of Vadiane. The Russians were moving along this road, and somewhere inside of this field the Russians were attacked by FPV drones. We don't, according to that video, we don't know the exact number of losses among the Russians, but as I understand the losses weren't so heavy, and according to that video, as I understand, the Russians were moving further to the north in direction of this tree line. So there are very high chances that as a result of clashes the Russians managed to establish control over this area. Furthermore, during the previous days we got updates that the Russians managed to develop their positions on the west of that tree line, so there are very high chances that the Russians had progress, and maybe today we're going to receive more geolocations from this area. Another important update are coming from Pervomayska. On this video we can see the Ukrainian sabotage group or rotation group who was heading on the edge position of Pervomayska. The Russians discovered the movements of Ukrainian forces and they started bombardments and bombings of the Ukrainians with FPV drones, with artillery systems, with tall flamethrower systems. So we don't also know the exact number of losses among the Ukrainians. We can use this video for geolocation purposes to understand the current Ukrainian positions, and according to this video the Ukrainians were moving along Pervomayska from the northwest. The Ukrainians were moving along the street. Somewhere in this area the Ukrainians were discovered by the Russians FPV drone, and they took a decision to hide somewhere in the shelter, and they entered this territory trying to hide from the Russian FPV drone strikes and artillery bombardments. So anyway, this area, as I understand, is under complete Ukrainian control. That was either sabotage group or maybe that was rotation group whose main purpose was to replace Ukrainian forces on these positions. Now we are moving to the central and south central part of Avdiivka. We don't have any geolocations, but we have like fire anomaly that confirms that the Russians also continue bombardments of this territory using all types of weapons they have. And the main purpose of these bombardments is that the Ukrainians have their positions very far from the mainland, from the main Avdiivka, and I'm talking about this defense belt that is under complete Ukrainian control. And to support these forces, the Ukrainians need to use these roads for these purposes, and the main Ukrainian reserves to support this part of Avdiivka fortifications are located in this area. So the Ukrainians use this territory, and that was the reason why the Russians were bombing this territory. They were trying to pin down the Ukrainians, to suppress them, and not to allow them to complete the normal rotation process on the, let's say, the Ukrainian fortification that located between Kamyanka and Krutaya Balka. I'm talking about this area. Now we're moving to the northern Avdiivka direction, about the Terikon. We're going to talk about Terikon and chemical plant. The Russian sources published another video of a very heavy fire in the chemical plant. The Russians are bombing this territory 24 hours, 7 days a week, trying to destroy the Ukrainian main fortifications. Some sources are saying that the Russians have already launched offensive operation and managed to establish control over the few streets and buildings and shelters, fortifications in chemical plant, yet we haven't received even a single geolocated confirmation. When talking about the southern part of Terikon, we got few pictures. Few mappers have already updated their map. For example, Syriac shows that the southern area is already under Russian control, and the Russian sources are showing the same picture, but the Russians also are adding that the Russians managed to cross the railways, and currently there are heavy clashes for the Ukrainian tree lines, so for the tree lines that located on the Ukrainian side of the railways. So according to all these updates, all these things, as I understand, currently this white cloud that I'm trying to mark is the main like area of clashes of Russian forces. So they're fighting for this territory, and if the Russians are able to establish control over these like tree lines, over the railway, of course the Ukrainian situation will get even worse in comparison with current situation. And it's all these geolocations, all these updates, of course, about the global scope of the battle for Avdiivka. But when talking about the local achievements, local operational like positions, currently the Russians have one important goal, one important target and the target is to establish control over this tree line, this one. This is probably the most important line for now at this stage of storm of Avdiivka. And if the Russians are able to get this tree line, the next phase is to establish control over this fortification, this one. So this is the global scope of, let's say, this week. If the Russians are able to capture this territory, then the Russians will be able to establish fire control and to establish any types of control over this like road that goes from Avdiivka to this residential area. And after that, the Russians will be able to start offensive operation in direction of this residential area, and as I understand that they will be able to take this territory very fast. So this is the main Russian focus, not on the chemical plants, not on the south, but from the northeast of Avdiivka agglomeration, of Avdiivka fortification, the territory that located below Terikon and below Vesele and below Krasnogorovka. This is the main focus of the Russian forces. Very interesting details and geolocation we got from the Ukrainian side. This is very fresh and recent geolocations. On this video we can see another episode of Russian offensive operation against the Ukrainian positions. On this video we can see how the Ukrainians were trying to slow down and to stop the Russians with all types of weapons they have. They were bombing the Russians heavily with FPV drones, with cluster rounds. A lot of cluster rounds were reused during the Russian attacks. The Ukrainians were bombing the Russians with just artillery strike. And on this video we see the railways. So as you can see, and probably this is the first geolocated confirmation of the Russian presence along the railways. So the Ukrainian drone was flying above the railways, trying to spot and discover the Russian movements, the Russian troopers, and after that the Ukrainians were bombing the Russians with FPV drones and artillery. So this is the first evidence that the Russians do have control along the railways, and this is very important, interesting video. Also, the Ukrainians tried to show the level of losses among the Russians. Also, significant number of infantry were killed during that attack, but of course the level loss are very heavy, but we see that the Russians managed to achieve a significant result as a result of clashes on the northern part of Avdiivka. Furthermore, another important thing that the Russians don't have any problems, let's say, to storm Avdiivka when talking about equipment, when talking about the vehicles, tanks, ammo they have. The only problem the Russians have is to break and penetrate the first defense belt. And for these purposes, the Russians need to bring TOS flamethrower systems. And for example, during the previous day, the Russians tried to get on the combat line another TOS flamethrower system to ease the Russian progress and the Russian movement. But the Ukrainians also understand, as soon as the Russians are able to get TOS flamethrower systems to the combat line, we can start counting days before the entire Avdiivka go into fall. So that's why they pay like personal attention to this type of weapon. And on this video we see how the Russians almost got TOS flamethrower system to the combat line, but as a result of FPV drone strike that machine was destroyed, and after that there were very heavy explosions. So this is the main reason why the Russians are still slow. For example, when talking about this residential area, nothing can survive. I will add this icon cloud on map. Nothing can survive as a result of TOS flamethrower strike, no matter the fortifications and no matter the the shelters and the level on the ground. Everything will be destroyed. But the problem that first you need to get this system on the combat line. When talking about other direction, another important update, let's finish with Donetsk. The Russians today published the first photo of the newest Russian cruise missile with nuclear power engine, Burevestnik. This is the rocket missile that can fly above, like in the sky, for a very long period of time to control the situation. So very interesting update, and this is the weapon of, let's say, of 0 day, or how to sell this situation. This is the game changer that can. This is not the game changer. This is the most important security aspect of Russian Federation. This type of weapon can destroy anything in this world and can penetrate any air defense in the world as well. Some details are continue coming from Bakhmut direction. The Ukrainians activated their clashes in this area. They published significant number of videos with FPV drone strikes against the Russian positions. So we know the Ukrainian pattern, and every time the Ukrainian want to start some clashes or another offensive operation, first of all they try to pin down and try to clear the territory with FPV drones. So now we see that how the Ukrainians try to destroy the Russian forces along the railways, and probably they managed to achieve. And also the Ukrainians destroyed few armored vehicles inside the Bakhmut in the vicinity of Vilshany, Zaitseva, also with the usage of the same type of weapon, FPV drones. We know that Ukrainians have established a small foothold on the Russian side of the railways in the vicinity of Avdiivka, so I expect this week also some attempts from the Ukrainian side to attack. Very interesting update is coming from Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. According to some sources, Zelensky is planning to dismiss Zaluzhny, and the main reason of that Zaluzhny haven't managed to achieve any results during the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation in Zaporozhye. In Vremivka, this is like official position, official version why Zelensky wants to dismiss Zaluzhny, but some sources are saying that Zelensky wants to dismiss Zaluzhny because Zelensky needs to make president elections the next year, and Zaluzhny might be like a candidate for this position, and of course there are very high chances that Zelensky would lose the battle with Zaluzhny for president chair in Ukraine. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.